Yashodanandana Vrajana Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Varachari Jaya Gopi Jana Baba Gopi Jana Bala Ba Divardhari Yashodanandan Rajajana Janjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Samuna Tira Vanachari Samuna Tira Vanachari Aya Radha Madhava Nindadihari Aya Radha Madhava Nindadihari Madhava Kunjabihari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajratacharya Astacharya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajratacharya Astacharya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Sharidas Thakur Ki Prem Sri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Damadam Ki Navadip Maya Padam Ki Jagannath Puridam Ki Gangamaya Ki Yamunamaya Ki Tulasi Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Gaura All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. We're speaking on the Srimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, creation in the fourth order. And we're on chapter number 4. Sati quits her body. And I think we chant 5 ourselves, and then as a community we chant 6. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'll just chant 5 myself, and then we can chant 6 together. Samsarika Kanduka Darpana Bhuja Spetata Patra Gajana Shagaribi Hitayanayar Tundubi Shankavenubir Krishendram Aropya Etankita Yayu. I know Pada doesn't have a purport, so it wasn't chanted. So we always read the other ones individually, and then as a group we chant 6 together. Translation: the disciples of Lord Shiva arranged for Sati to be seated on the back of a bull and gave her the bird which was her pet. They bore a lotus flower, a mirror, and all such paraphernalia for her enjoyment, and covered her with a great canopy. Followed by a singing party with drums, conch shells, and bugles, the entire procession was as pompous as a royal parade. Okay, continuing with 6. We'll go through the words. The words are down by the translations. Brahmagosha Viradita Yagya Aishasam Viprashijustam Vibudai Sha Sarvashaha Rit Daru Ayaha Hanchana Darpa Dharmabihi Nishrista Bandham Yajanam Samavishat. The word mrit for clay, the mridanga is called mridanga. It comes from that word mrit, which becomes mrid due to the Sanskrit sandhi. And then the anga, which means limbs or body, is added onto it. Okay. Abrahma Goshojita Yagavashasang Viprarshi Jushtam Vibhudaisha Sarvasha. You want to scroll up a bit? Not a touch screen, huh? You scroll it up a bit. Oh, there you go. Very good. We'll start over again. Abrahma Goshorjita Yagavashasam Viprarshi Justam Vibhudai Sarvasha. Vidarvaya Kanchana Darba Charma Beer Nishrista Bandam Yajanam Samavishat. Abrahma Goshorjita Yagavashasam Viprarshi Justam Vibhudaischa Sarvashaha. Vridaryahya Kanchana Darba Charma Beer Nishrista Bandam Yajanam Samavishat. Abrahma Goshorjita Yagavashasam Viprarshi Justam Vibhudaischa Sarvashaha. Vidavaraya Kanchana Darba Charma Beer Nishrista Bandam Yajanam Samavishat. Please chant. Abrahma Goshwarjita Yagavaishasam Kanchadharma Vrishista Bandham Yajanam Samavisha Brahma Goshwarjita Yagavaishasam Arshijishtam Vibhudaishta Sarvasha Vidhavaya Kanchana Dharma Charma Bir Nishista Bandham Yajana Samavisha. Anybody else? Abrahma Goshwarjita Yagavaishasam Nishista Bandham Yajanam Samavisha. Anybody else? Okay, we'll go through the word meanings. From all sides. Samagosha, with the sounds of the Vedic hymns. Purjita, decorated. Yagya, sacrifice. Aishasham, destruction of animals. Viparshijustam, attended by the great sages. Budai, with demigods. Shah, and Sarvashaha, on all sides. Mrit, clay. Daru, wood. Aya, iron. Kanchana, gold. Darba, kusha grass. Karmabihi, skins. Nishista, made of. Bandham, sacrificial animals in pots. Yajanam, sacrifice. Samavishat, entered. Translation. So this is she, being Sati. She then reached her father's house where the sacrifice was being performed and entered the arena where everyone was chanting the Vedic hymns. Great sages, brahmanas, and demigods were all assembled there, and there were many sacrificial animals, as well as pots made of clay, stone, gold, grass, and skin, which were all requisite for the sacrifice. Report by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. When learned sages and brahmanas assemble to chant Vedic mantras, some of them also engage in arguing about the conclusion of the scriptures. Thus, some of the sages and brahmanas were arguing, and some of them were chanting the Vedic mantras. So the entire atmosphere was surcharged with transcendental sound vibration. This transcendental sound vibration has been simplified in the transcendental vibration Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In this age, no one is expected to be highly educated in the Vedic ways of understanding because people are very slow, lazy, and unfortunate, as we personally have experience of. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has recommended the sound vibration, Hare Krishna. And in the Srimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 5, Text 32, is also recommended, Yagyai Sankirtana Prayayar Yajantihi Sumedasa. At the present moment, it is impossible to gather sacrificial sacrificial necessities because of the poverty of the population and their lack of knowledge in Vedic mantras. Therefore, this age, it is recommended that people gather together and chant the Hare Krishna mantra to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is accompanied by his associates. Indirectly, this indicates Lord Chaitanya, who is accompanied by his associates Nityananda, Advaita, and others. And that is the process of performing yajna in this age. Another significant point in this verse is that there were animals for sacrifice. That these animals were meant for sacrifice does not mean that they are meant to be killed. Great sages and realized souls assembled were performing yajnas, and their realization was tested by the animal sacrifice, just as in modern science, tests are made on animals to determine the effectiveness of a particular medicine. The Brahmanas entrusted with the performance of yajna were very realized souls, and to test their realization, an old animal was offered in the fire and rejuvenated. That was a test of a Vedic mantra. The animals gathered were not meant to be killed and eaten. The real purpose of a sacrifice was not to replace a slaughterhouse, but to test the Vedic mantra by giving an animal new life. Animals were used to test the power of the Vedic mantras, not for meat. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Padaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamani Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charne Nirvasesha Shrimati Pasatya Deshtani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Veda Gadadhara Shri Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Anchakalpatarubhyascha, Krpa Sindhubhyascha, Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So a lot is being talked about here about sacrifice, Yajanam. Sacrifice also, we've been chanting Bhagavad Gita and we're thinking a lot about Bhagavad Gita this week because of Gita Jayanti, and there's many, many verses about sacrifice in Bhagavad Gita. So here Prabhupada talks about sacrifice, about the sacrifice of the age, Sankirtan, and about sacrifice of animals. And he talks about how Brahmanas are always arguing about the absolute truth. So when I was thinking about how Brahmanas argue about the conclusion of the scriptures, it reminded me of a very nice story I heard in the Krishna book. And I was playing the audiobook for the Kartik. And that's once upon a time these great universal sages were getting together and they're arguing about who was actually supreme. Was it Brahma, was it Vishnu, or was it Shiva? And they decided if they could figure out which one was most advanced in goodness, that person would be the supreme out of all three. So they elected Bhrigu Muni to perform the test. So he went to each of the three universal controllers, starting with Brahma. And Bhrigu is the son of Brahma, and he's expected to show respect to his father. But instead of like bowing down and offering some words of praise, he just stood there and not saying anything or doing anything, showing any special regard for him. And Brahma, who is a little tinged with a mode of passion, became angry, but because he's intelligent, he controlled his anger, and no altercation happened. And then Bhrigu took note of that, and they went to see Shiva, who's his brother. And because they're brothers, it was expected there should be some affectionate exchange. But Bhrigu considered that Shiva was contaminated by the skulls around his neck and the crematorium ashes, and didn't want to touch him when Shiva came to embrace him. So that made Shiva really angry. We know that Shiva is he's Ashutosh, he's easily satisfied, but also easily angered. And he actually got out his trident, preparing to kill his brother, and instead he said, no, he's your brother! And Bhrigu got out of their fast and went to the abode of Vishnu, where Vishnu was being massaged by Lakshmi. And he came up and he actually kicked Vishnu in the chest, which is like actually inconceivable. Like, who can imagine like we have the deity on the altar, like who can imagine a pujari kicking the deity, like it's like unthinkable. So at any rate, so Lord Vishnu, he apologized to Bhrigu that his chest was so hard, and he apologized for his lack of offering him a proper reception, and he offered to massage the feet of Bhrigu. And so at that point, Bhrigu got a clear indication that Vishnu is supreme, and he went back to the assembly of sages and reported his investigation, and they all very happily glorified Lord Vishnu. And that's very relevant because sacrifice is actually meant for Lord Vishnu. People perform sacrifice for all kinds of things, but we learn in Bhagavad Gita, probably the most famous shloka in the 3rd chapter, which is about sacrifice. And I know many of you are very scholarly students in Bhagavad Gita. Could somebody quote 3:9 for us? No, that's 13. Say again? Yeah, you got it. Louder. So just yell it out. Come on. We want to hear. You know, Yagnartat, Kamanonya Cha. Kamanonya Cha. Right? 3rd line, anyone? Okay, very good. Very good. Okay, we got him going. The work done as sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work binds one to this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. In that way, you will always remain free from bondage. So this is the first of several verses about sacrifice in Bhagavad Gita. And the next one talks about how in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this sacrifice yajna, for its performance will bestow upon you all desirable things. So Krishna says later on in the 7th chapter, Manushyanam sahasreshu kastad yadiside yaditama apisidanam kashan mam vejitatara. That hardly any 1 in 1,000 people is endeavoring for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly anyone knows him in truth. So most people aren't actually interested in self-realization, which is life's goal. But sacrifice for Vishnu is something that every person in society is supposed to be aware of in a Vedic society, that they have to perform sacrifice. The administrators, the Kshatriyas, one of their duties is to arrange for sacrifice. And everyone is supposed to be aware that actually behind everything is Lord Vishnu. And unless Vishnu is pleased, we're not going to have a real life. As it said here, you'll be happy in this life, and you'll be happy in the next life by performing the sacrifice. I think the translation in the other Bhagavad Gita has some additional words to it. So at any rate, we can't expect everyone's going to get initiated by a bona fide spiritual master and chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 regular principles, but we can expect everyone gets together with their family in the evening and chants Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're meant to remind people that they're servants of Lord Vishnu, that there's a supreme being who's behind everything. We're 100% dependent on Vishnu. If Vishnu didn't supply any oxygen, we wouldn't live for more than a few minutes. If he didn't supply any water, we wouldn't live for more than a few days. If he didn't supply any food, we wouldn't live for more than a few weeks. Actually, there was one story that Prabhupada, he was talking with a Mayavadi, and he has like so many good arguments against the Mayavadis. But this time, he was saying that you may study your impersonal philosophy, but actually, if you don't perform sacrifice from Lord Vishnu, it's not going to rain, and then there won't be any production of food, and then you'll starve. So what's the value of your impersonal philosophy if the result is, no sacrifice is performed? Right? It's not viable. Just to survive, you have to perform sacrifice for Vishnu. So that's so in this purport about how the Lord sent all creatures sent forward sacrifices for Vishnu, Prabhupada talks in the purport. In this age of Kali, the Sankirtan Yagya, the chanting of the holy names, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures. The transcendental system was introduced by Lord Chaitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. So this is one of the places in the Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada mentions Lord Chaitanya and this Sankirtan Yagya, which is very important because this is one of the main books we distribute is Bhagavad Gita, and we want to introduce the Sankirtan Yagya. So this particular purport is where Prabhupada mentions that. Sankirtan Yagya and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna's devotional form as Lord Chaitanya is mentioned in the Srimad Bhāgavatam as follows, with special reference to the Sankirtan Yagya. Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishna Sango Pangasta Parshtam Yagya Sankirtanya Prayari Janti Sumeda Sa. In this age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates by performing Sankirtan Yagya. Other yagyas prescribed in the Vedic literatures are not easy to perform in this age. The Sankirtan Yagya is easy and sublime for all purposes. So people in human society are meant to come to the realization that it's a duty of every human being to perform sacrifice for Vishnu, and our position is to try to encourage people to perform this sacrifice. First of all, understand that we're dependent on the Supreme Being, and that we're indebted to the Supreme Being. Therefore, we're expected to perform sacrifice. And the other, as Dylan reminded us, we should eat foods that are prepared for sacrifice, because everything's actually the property of the Supreme Lord, and therefore we're supposed to offer the Supreme Lord's property back to Him in service. So Krishna says, devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment barely eat only sin. So the idea is that everything we eat is actually entangling us in the material world, but if we offer it first to Krishna, not only do we become free from the karma, from all the living entities, all the plants that we killed, but we also develop in our devotion for Him. And actually, Krishna mentions the word bhakti twice in the verse about offering him water, the fruit water. Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhakti prayachati tadam bhakti paritam ashnami paritam. And if we offer fruit, leaf, water, etc., to Krishna with devotion, he will accept it. And by his acceptance, we become free from the karma. And not only that, we develop our relationship with Krishna. And then the next point he mentions is that yajna is the cause of the rains, and the rains are the cause of grains. So just to survive, we have to perform yajna. It's interesting that 2 or 3 times when Srila Prabhupada visited Hyderabad, there was a drought. And of course, when he visited, there was all kinds of Krishna Katha and all kinds of Krishna Kirtan, and the drought actually just dissipated. They actually even mentioned it in the newspapers in connection with the Swami coming. And then there's another story regarding that. Apparently, there was a radio show in the Midwest that was heard in many, many states. And Kirtanananda Maharaj was on this radio show. And it was during a time when there was a serious drought in that region, so the radio commentators, because the drought was on everyone's mind, he said, well, do you have anything to say about this drought, and he said, yeah, it's because we aren't performing sacrifice to the Supreme Lord, there's drought, and if we chant the names of the Lord, the drought will be, dissipated and like that, and the people, this drought was such a traumatic thing, and that he decided, like Kirtananda decided to have a kirtan right there in the radio station, and encouraged the announcer encouraged the friends out in the radio land to participate, and they had this kirtan, and then there was like torrential rain that afternoon, and the whole drought was finished. And there's another story actually that I was, Prithu Prabhu was a famous preacher at the rainbow gatherings. He would regularly shave up like 10 people at each rainbow gathering. He would have incredible prasadam made with ghee and kirtan, and he was very, very good at preaching philosophy and very personable and very logical, And so this devotee, there's this American devotee who married a Czech girl who I was talking to at a Polish festival. He was telling me this story. He said, yeah, I like the food, I like the philosophy, but I wasn't completely convinced, So these rainbow people, they have they get together and they share a meal in the evening and they chant Om before the meal, And they have a big bonfire, they sit around the bonfire. Well, so because it was like a super dry year, the rangers wouldn't let them do their fire, So they were like, they weren't having a good time because they couldn't do their fire. So, what Prithu Prabhu said, he said, well, we can chant for rain by performing the sacrifice of chanting the names of God. We can, So he got some of his people who were like a little favorable to his message, and they had this kirtan, and the whole sky was like perfectly clear, and then right above the kirtan party, this cloud formed, and it started pouring down rain, and all the hippies were dancing in the rain. And the guy was telling me the story. He said, yeah, I like the food, I like the philosophy, but when Prithu Prabhu made it rain, that convinced me. So the fact of the matter that all this Vedic truth is real, and really, if you do perform sacrifice, it actually will rain. And that's just as the animal sacrifice, the mantras were tested by, bringing the animal back to life. The rain in performance to the Sankirtan Yajna is evidence of its validity, that the Lord accepted the sacrifice. And so we should propagate this idea in human society that that there is a supreme person beyond everything, and he can be pleased by sacrifice, and the sacrifice is simply chanting his holy names. And like every scripture has some name of God. I was talking to, we had an event called the Interfaith Dinner. And they would have part of the meal at each of these different churches. Like they'd have the hors d'oeuvres at the Hillel House, and then they had the drinks at the Episcopal Church, and then they had the main course at the Catholic Church, and we teamed up with the Catholic Church because our church wasn't on the main street, and we serve out our Krishna spaghetti. So the idea was you talk with other people from the other traditions. So I was talking to this rabbi as we were walking from church to church having our dinner, and I was saying that we focus on chanting the name of God in our tradition, and he was saying in the Jewish Kabbalah they have 72 names of God. And apparently Hari and Rama are actually two of the 72 names, yeah. And the Muslims, the Allah has 100 or 99, depending on who you talk to. And of course, we have the Vishnu Sahasranam, the 1,000 names of Vishnu. And it never says that that's really a complete list, Actually, Krishna's unlimited. He has unlimited names, and he's invested all his potencies in his names. Nija Sarva Shakti. When we chant the Shikshastika too, it has that phrase, Nija Sarva Shakti. Nija means his own, his Sarva means all, and Shakti means energy. In his holy names, he's invested all these energies. So if people get together and chant the name of the Lord, then the Lord will be pleased. And all the anomalies that we're experiencing in human society will be rectified. One of my favorite verses, which is just 4 verses past the one that Prabhupada was quoting here, the main one about Lord Chaitanya, goes on talking about the Kali Yuga avatar. And I want to make sure I get the translation right, because I memorized the Sanskrit, but not exactly the translation. Alim subhajayantya gunagak sarbhagina tak sankirtanenaiva sarvasvarta bilabhyate. Those who are actually advanced in knowledge are able to appreciate the essential value of this age of Kali. Such enlightened people worship Kali Yuga because in this fallen age, all perfection of life can easily be achieved by the performance of Sankirtan. So sometimes we get depressed because it's Kali Yuga and there's all these bad things going on. But this verse says that actually, people who actually know the truth, they worship Kali Yuga. Because the chanting of the holy name is so good that it actually makes up for all the bad and puts us in the positive credit, actually. So, and there's a nice verse by Prabodhananda Saraswati where he says that the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, they see Vishvam Purna Sukhayate. They see the entire universe filled with happiness. So why is the entire universe filled with happiness? Because more and more people every day are chanting Hare Krishna. And the tide of Kali Yuga is being curtailed. And people are advancing in devotional service by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's just getting better and better for the next 4,500 years. So there's some other verses I thought I'd mention, because sacrifice is such a big topic in the Bhagavad Gita. I have my Hawaiian cough drops here. Highly recommended. Dr. Jeff bought me some when I was in India last time. One of those huge jars. So in the middle of the 4th chapter, there's so many verses about sacrifice. He lists all kinds of different sacrifices Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering sacrifice to them. Some offer sacrifice in the fire of Supreme Brahman. And the next one talks about the brahmacharis. They offer the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind. And the grihastas who offer the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. And then it talks about how others, in terms of mind and sense control, offer the functions of all the senses as well as the vital force as oblations in the fire of the controlled mind. And he talks about all the people perform different types of sacrifice. Some become enlightened by sacrificing their material possessions. Some take strict vows. Some practice yoga. Others study the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. And he talks about all those who perform pranayama, come inclined to the process of breath restraint. They come in trance, offering the practice stopping the movement of the outgoing breath and the incoming and the incoming and the outgoing, and remain in trance, stopping breathing. Others curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. And then after this whole list of sacrifices, that all these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions. Having tasted the nectar of the remnants of such sacrifices, they go to the supreme eternal atmosphere. So there he's revealing what the purpose of all the sacrifice is, to become cleansed of all sinful reactions. And that's what goes on when we chant the holy name of the Lord. We become cleansed of sinful reactions. The people become cleansed of sinful reactions, and even the place becomes purified. Metta Krishna Swami was saying that Prabhupada said, when the chanting party goes down the street is never the same. When people walk down the street in the future, they become purified. So just think all these people going to Union Square, they're becoming purified. Washington Square, Columbus Circle, the Atlantic Barclays. Everyone's becoming purified because they walk through the place where we've done so much kirtan. It actually changes the structure of the place. It said regarding the holy name, Sankirtan Parihasam Vastovam Halam Eva Vavakuntanama Granama Sheshagam Haram Virdu. One chants the holy name to indicate something else. If one chants the holy name for musical entertainment, if one chants the holy name jokingly, or if even one chants the holy name in derision, the person is freed from unlimited volumes of sinful reactions. This is known to all learned men. Srimad Bhāgavatam 6:2-14. So people get so purified by hearing the congregation chanting. It's inconceivable. And that's the big thing that's blocking people from becoming interested in Krishna consciousness. Because people are suffering sinful reactions, they're not interested. That's described in the Bhagavad Gita. Yesham chanta katam papam janam puni karmanam jandamo nirmukta bhajantimam chudavarta. Persons who've acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful reactions are completely eradicated, they engage in my devotional service with determination. So people are uninterested in devotional service, even though Krishna really is all attractive. And really, even though we all really do have an eternal relationship of transcendental affection with him, people are uninterested because of their sinful reactions. So how their sinful reactions can be dispelled? It's by hearing the chanting of the holy name. They're also dispelled by taking the prasadam, and they're also dispelled by reading the books and giving donations for the books. But the sad truth is not so many people. We have a restaurant, but how many people eat in the restaurant? We distribute books every day, but how many books do we distribute? But every day, thousands of people become purified from their sinful reactions by hearing holy name and the Harinam. And all these people become eligible to perform more devotional service, to buy books, to take prasadam, to associate with the devotees. So this this public congregational chanting of the holy name is the most powerful thing we do as a movement. And therefore, Prabhupada wanted us to go out every day, at least for an hour, from all of his centers. And so it's very important that we do that. And we can always talk to our authorities about arranging our schedule, so there's time to do 1 hour of Harinam every day. And if the charges for transportation, that's and the time required for transportation, it's not viable, then try to do 7 hours a week, which is a lot more cost effective and more effective in terms of not wasting time on the subway. But we have to be out there with the holy name to purify the people from the reaction, so they have an opportunity to become interested in Krishna consciousness. So what else does Krishna say about sacrifice? It matters how we perform the sacrifice. And that's mentioned in the 17th chapter, where Krishna talks about sacrifice in the different modes. Of sacrifices, that's which is performed according to duty and scriptural rules, and with no expectations of reward, is of the nature of goodness. So when we perform the Sankirtan Yagya, we're not desiring some material benefit from it. We're simply desiring to please the Lord, because that's what he wants us to do. Lord Chaitanya came here, he asked us to chant the holy name. We just chant the holy name because we want to see Lord Chaitanya smile. We want to see Lord Chaitanya smile. We want to see them happily dancing on the altar and feeling good about ourselves. So we chant because we want the Lord to be pleased with us. We don't really chant for rain, but only during droughts. We chant anyway. Like Prabhupada would make the point that people approach the Lord, people worship the Lord when they become distressed. But if they worshipped the Lord the whole time, they would never get into those situations of distress. So then that sacrifice, which is tinged with passion, is performed for some material benefit, or it's performed out of pride or ostentation. People want to become famous for performing some religious thing, but the desire for pride is actually something that's very deep-rooted and binds us to this world. So we have to practice doing the right thing just out of duty and to please the Lord, and not to gain some notoriety, because it's contaminated. And then very important, the sacrifice in the mode of ignorance. We have to make sure we don't fall in that. So vidihinam, if we don't follow the directions of Shastra. Ashristanam, we don't distribute prasadam. Mantrahinam, we don't chant the mantras. Adakshinam, we don't give remuneration to the priests. Shraddha viryatam, we don't have faith. Yagya tamasam parichakshate, that sacrifice is in the mode of ignorance. That sacrifice performed in defiance of scriptural injunctions, in which no spiritual food is sacrificed, no hymns are chanted, no remunerations are made to the priests, and which is faithless. That sacrifice is of the nature of ignorance. And then we may think, if we perform a lot of spiritual activity, we get to a point where we don't have to perform sacrifice anymore. But Krishna doesn't think that we actually do get to a point where we don't have to perform a sacrifice anymore. And he reminds us that in the chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita, in verse number 5. Yagya dana tapa karma nakchagam karma eva tat yagyo danam tapaschaiva pavanani manishina. acts of sacrifice. Charity, penance are not to be given up, but should be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Even if we think we're such a great soul, we don't have to perform any sacrifice, penance, or austerity. We should do it anyway, and we'll become even more purified. So, the Sankirtan Yoga is recommended for this age, and it's very important that we have complete faith in it, as Srila Prabhupada did, and that we practice it every day. We chant in front of the deities, Mangalarati and Sundararati, and we chant in the streets at least an hour every day to purify the souls in our area and give them the chance to become devotees someday. And with Chaitanya wanted this congregation chanting to go on in every town and village, and we're in this town and village, and it's our responsibility to make sure it happens. Any questions or comments or realizations people like to share? Ramarai Prabhu? Does somebody give him the microphone, please?
It's not just the perceivable practicality that the people walking by hear it, but because it is the service wanted to be done by Krishna himself, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. He is the Yagna Purush, and he is ordering and desiring this to take place. And because he is the supreme controller, he's Yogeshvar, he's the master of all mysticism, meaning beyond our practical analyzation or planning or ability to even understand what is Shreyas, long-term benefit, that he will automatically make everything happen as he predicted 500 years ago. In every town and village, my name will be chanted, and that this will become the predominant dharma on the platform, on the planet. There's a statement by Prabhupada in the fourth canto in regards to King Paranjan in his next life as Queen Bidarbi, the loyal and chaste wife of King Malayadvaj, who's representative of the Mahabhagavat devotee, that after she puts his body on the funeral pyre, then a Brahmin who is saying, "I'm your old friend," is actually the super soul. So in that section, Prabhupada writes in the purport that the Lord, seeing the devotee's merciful attempt to save the fallen humanity, save the fallen souls, he enlightens the people from within automatically. So the functionality and the obvious reality that if we don't go out and do it, it's not going to, how's it going to get done? Well, it won't get done by us. It'll be done by subsequent devotees. But why make Krishna have a problem that he has to overcome? We should try to effectively. And if we do it, just like Arjuna, when he comes back and reports to Maharaj Yudhishthira the disappearance of Lord Krishna, and he reminisces all the incredible, miraculous things that he was able to do, particularly overcome the more than adequate and huge military situation created by Duryodhana and the Kauravas, and simply by Krishna's presence with me on the battlefield, and particularly his charioteer, I overcame all of this by his grace. So seemingly this insurmountable ocean of demoniac activity, demoniac leaders. This is the Bhagavad Gita 16th chapter come to life in reality. It's not just something out of the battle between the demigods and the demons in the 8th canto that we read something happened millions of years ago. It's right here today. That this small band of devotees, we're outnumbered seemingly by statistic, but because we have Krishna and we're performing Krishna's instruction, we're executing Krishna's instruction, all types of victory and morale, everything will be there. So we should practice and execute, and then we'll get the realization. We don't get realization in something that we don't do or don't practice. And especially for us here in New York City, where Srila Prabhupada himself came to inculcate and inaugurate the entire Vishva Dharma for the entire universe, not just this planet. We have a very special privilege and accelerated, let's say, amplified ability to realize these things, and along with that, a very, very sacred responsibility to do the same.
Reminds me that in the Mood and Mission book by Bhakti Swami, I'm proofreading, he quotes Prabhupada saying that this is guaranteed to happen, that Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan chanting of the holy names going on in every town and village, and if we don't do it, then somebody else is going to get the credit for it. So this is our opportunity to do that. And Vishvam Purna Sukhayate, the whole universe will become happy. Your other question? Well, it's actually 9 o'clock. So I'll conclude with one quote by Bhakti Siddhanta about Nam Sankirtan. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, Sri Krishna Nam Sankirtan is the best sadhana. If other sadhanas help us in our Krishna Nam Sankirtan, they deserve to be called sadhana. Otherwise, they are simply impediments to sadhana. Sri Krishna Nam Sankirtan is the emperor of all sadhanas. It is the only infallible sadhana capable of bringing us to siddhi. That's the most eloquent statement I ever heard about Sri Krishna Nam Sankirtan. It's fitting to end this class that focuses on that. Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki. Sri Krishna Nam Sankirtan ki. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki. Krpa Prabhu ki. Mahaprasad ki.